I platinumed The Last of Us Part 2 and it has a few trophies you need to watch out for. As always, I try to keep these videos as spoiler free as possible and only show gameplay from the first few hours or so. To quickly recap what this game is about, the game continues the story of the first game, which I also made a video on and you should check out after this video. It takes place 5 years after the first game, Part 1 and TV adaptation, and it's just as emotionally impactful as the first. So if you're looking to see what lies ahead for Season 2 or want to continue the game, then this is the game to find out. There's no missable trophies and thankfully no glitch trophies either, so it's a relatively easy and straightforward trophy list. The platinum percentage comes in at 4%, which is fairly high considering you have to play through it more than once. I'd rate the difficulty at a 3 out of 10, if you play on the normal difficulty. If you play on Grounded, which has a DLC trophy attached to it, it'll be more like a 6 out of 10. With a lot of exploring to do, it already took me 36 hours to platinum, but I'd expect it averages at around 40 hours for most people, which is slightly longer than Part 1. To give an idea of how enjoyable this game is to platinum, well, it's great. The game itself is fantastic, and one of my all-time favorites. The stealthy and slow gameplay really suits the setting well and gets you really immersed into the story. And speaking of the story itself, it's incredible. Although opinions definitely differ, I fucking loved it. In my eyes, it's probably the best story-driven game ever. Besides Part 1, of course. Anyway, let's head over straight to the trophies. First of all, it's good to know that it's required to play through the game twice. Not entirely, but just over halfway through. Thankfully, you can play this on whatever difficulty you like, as there's no difficulty related trophies. It's also recommended to do this because your first playthrough should just be focused on the story itself, but playing through it again is necessary because of the upgrades you need to do. For the skills and weapon upgrades and probably a lot of other collectibles along the way. And I'll go over the collectibles in a bit, but starting off with the upgrades, it's impossible to get all the upgrades in the first playthrough. This is why a second playthrough to about roughly halfway is necessary. What you want to do is make sure you loot all the spots you come across to get all the possible supplements you find. Not only will this greatly enhance your gameplay, but you'll work on your trophy simultaneously. Just make sure to do these upgrades and spread out the weapon usage along the way. These go hand in hand with the handful of training manuals and weapons you need to find. But they aren't too difficult to miss as each training manual appears in more than one location throughout the playthrough. You can upgrade the weapons at workbenches, and there are 25 workbenches you need to find. You'll find most of them naturally because the game wants you to find them, but any that you do happen to miss you can find in your second playthrough. Just make sure that you interact with the workbench to confirm that it has registered. For actual collectibles, artifacts and journal entries will be a major thing you need to look out for. There will be so many of them you find along the way that you'll actually be surprised how many you had somehow missed at the end. A journal entry is registered every time something is written down in the journal, obviously, whilst the artifacts can be anything from jewelry to notes and papers, and will be lying in hidden places. I'd refer to a guide in your second playthrough when you're trying to collect these. Now, some of these might have clues or passwords for safes, and these safes are also necessary to find and will contain valuable supplies and ammunition. There are 14 of them, so keep an eye out for them. You can actually crack these safes if you listen carefully to a click, but because you need the clues as a collectible anyway, it's best to look for that regardless. Something else you want to keep an eye out for is when you're in the big open area. This is where you'll have a few locations to discover, so it's best to do this on your own without spoiling anything, but there are a lot of locations you want to find, so keep exploring. You can visit all the locations you missed in your second playthrough or even via chapter select. And another is to craft every item. But this should come to you very naturally. If you don't get this on your first playthrough, you'll get this on your second one, and otherwise just craft everything. It's that simple. Now everything I mentioned before can be found throughout the whole story, yet the other collectibles that remain can only be found in either the first or second part of the story. Without spoiling anything, the trading cards can only be found in the first half, whereas the coins can only be found in the second half. They are discovered in similar ways, so it's nothing too different, but it's important to keep this in the back of your head. You'll understand once you play through the story. Other trophies are for miscellaneous tasks that you might want to check out after beating the story as not to spoil any surprises. You might have already done a few of them yourself. The overall experience was great. Having to play through the story more than once was actually a really interesting one that opened up a new perspective to the narrative. The gameplay loop was fun and satisfying to do, whilst the looting felt rewarding before and after each combat encounter. I didn't have any problems or issues with any trophies because the quality is just so high. The collectible tracker in the game ensured everything registered and worked fine, even when using chapter select. And as I mentioned before, I f***ing love this game and series. There's so many little details, it's actually mind-blowing. And the music is also so good. Gustavo's work is fantastic. If you liked the first game or the HBO show, you definitely won't be disappointed with part 2. If you haven't already, check out the other video I made on the trophy experience in The Last of Us Part 1. If you have any more tips, tricks or questions, share them in the comments below. And that's it. See ya!